Room 314. It was supposed to be a normal business trip. James checked into the hotel late, exhausted after a long flight. The receptionist gave him the key to room 314 without making eye contact, her hands shaking as she slid the card across the counter. James didn't think much of it. He'd been on the road for weeks, staying at all kinds of places. This was just another hotel in another city, nothing special. The hallway leading to his room was dimly lit, and the air was heavy with the scent of mildew, as though the building itself was rotting from the inside. When he opened the door to room 314, the chill hit him first. The air conditioning was cranked up to an unnatural level, freezing the room. He reached for the thermostat but found it locked. No matter what he did, the temperature wouldn't change. The room was basic: a bed, a small TV, a desk in the corner, and a large mirror hanging on the wall across from the bed. It was just a place to sleep. James reminded himself, pulling out his laptop to get some work done. But as he sat down at the desk, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It felt like someone or something was watching him. He glanced at the mirror, and for a split second, he thought he saw a shadow dart across the room. He dismissed it as his imagination, turned up by exhaustion. But the strange feeling only grew. The light in the room flickered, and a deep, unsettling creak echoed through the walls. He tried to focus on his work, but every time he looked at the mirror, he swore the reflection was just a little off, like it was showing more than just the room. As the night went on, the temperature dropped even lower. James curled under the thin blanket, trying to ignore the noises coming from the bathroom. He hadn't used it since he checked in, but now the faucet was running. Slow, steady drips, echoing in the silence. Annoyed, he dragged himself out of bed to turn it off. But when he entered the bathroom, the faucet was bone dry. No water was running, but the dripping sound continued. That's when he saw it, the writing on the bathroom mirror. Fogged over as if someone had just taken a shower, but the room was freezing cold. The message was written in shaky, uneven letters. "Get out." His blood ran cold. He wiped the mirror clean, convinced it was a prank or a trick of his mind. But as soon as he turned away, he heard it, a soft whisper behind him. He spun around, but there was nothing there. James had had enough. He grabbed his things, ready to leave, when he noticed something strange about the mirror in the bedroom. There was a figure standing behind him in the reflection, a pale woman with hollow eyes, her mouth twisted into a silent scream. His heart raced as he turned, expecting to find someone standing there, but the room was empty. Then the mirror cracked, spidering out from the center. The woman's face twisted in agony. The room grew colder, the air thick with the stench of decay. A scream erupted from the walls, shrill and inhuman, filling the room with a deafening sound. James bolted for the door, his hands shaking as he fumbled with the lock. When he finally managed to open it, he ran down the hallway, not stopping until he reached the lobby. The receptionist looked at him with wide eyes as if she knew. "Room 314, wasn't it?" she asked quietly. He nodded, out of breath. "I told them to stop booking that room. They never listen." She shook her head, looking genuinely sorry. "That room, it's been haunted for years. A woman died in there. Some say her spirit never left." James never asked what happened to the woman. He didn't want to know. All he knew was that he would never stay in another hotel again. The investigation, James couldn't sleep after that night. The moment he left the hotel, a cold sweat covered his body, and his mind buzzed with questions he didn't want to ask. Who was that woman? Why was the room haunted? Most importantly, how many people before him had encountered the same terrifying presence. A week after the incident, James received an email from his company requesting he return to the same city for another meeting. He tried to decline, claiming personal reasons, but they insisted. Reluctantly, he agreed. But this time, he vowed to avoid the cursed hotel. He booked a room at a different hotel just across town and decided to learn more about room 314. A deep part of him couldn't let it go. There had to be an explanation. On his day off, he visited the city library and began searching through old newspapers and archives. The librarian, an elderly woman with thick glasses, raised an eyebrow when he mentioned the hotel. "That place? You're not the first person asking about it," she said, her voice low. "People say it's haunted, but not many believe the stories. You, though, you've seen something, haven't you?" James hesitated but eventually nodded. The librarian didn't press him further, but after searching through their database, she found what he was looking for, an article from 30 years ago. Local woman found dead in mysterious hotel room incident. The article described a young woman named Claire Bennett, a solo traveler who had checked into room 314. She was found dead 2 days later under mysterious circumstances. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle. She was discovered sitting upright in front of the mirror, her face frozen in terror, her eyes wide open as if she'd seen something horrifying. The police ruled her death as a heart attack, but rumors spread quickly. Guests reported hearing her screams late at night, and multiple visitors claimed they'd seen her reflection in the mirror, even when they were alone. The hotel never closed, but after Claire's death, the room was mostly avoided, except by the unlucky few who were unknowingly assigned to it. James's stomach churned as he read. He could feel the icy presence of that room again, the way the air had grown thick with the scent of decay, the way the temperature had plummeted to unnatural lows. After returning to his hotel, James made a decision. He needed to go back. He had to know what happened in that room. Was Claire's spirit still trapped there? Or was there something far worse hiding in the shadows of room 314? That night, he made his way back to the old hotel. The front desk was manned by a different receptionist this time, a young man who seemed oblivious to the history of the place. James requested a room for one night, and to his relief, it wasn't 314. But he wasn't there to stay the night. He was there for answers. Around midnight, James snuck up to the third floor. The hallway was eerily quiet, the lights flickering as they had the first time he'd stayed there. Room 314 stood at the end of the corridor, its door looming like a shadow in the dim light. His heart pounded as he approached, but something drew him closer, a force he couldn't explain. It felt as if the room was waiting for him. Taking a deep breath, he reached for the doorknob. It was unlocked. The room was exactly as he remembered it, cold, damp, and oppressive. The mirror still hung on the wall, cracked from their previous encounter, but something was different this time. The air felt thicker, heavier, almost suffocating. The room itself seemed alive, breathing around him. James stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. He stood in front of the mirror, his reflection staring back at him. For a long moment, nothing happened, but then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw her again, Claire. She was standing behind him, her pale face just inches from his. Her eyes were hollow, blackened pits, and her mouth hung open in a silent scream. Her hand reached out, brushing the back of his neck, icy cold. Panicking, James stumbled backward, knocking into the desk. "What do you want?" he shouted, his voice shaking. The air grew colder, and then faintly he heard it. The whisper again, only this time it was clearer. "Help me." Her voice was broken, desperate. James stood frozen, his mind racing. "How? What happened to you?" he asked, his breath forming visible puffs in the frigid room. Suddenly, the door to the bathroom creaked open, and a new, stronger stench filled the air, rot and decay, stronger than before. James took a step forward, peering inside the bathroom, but it was pitch black. He turned back toward the mirror, only to find the reflection had changed again. Now Claire was joined by a man, tall, dark, his face shrouded in shadows. He loomed behind her, his hand gripping her shoulder tightly. His eyes, though hidden, radiated a malevolent energy. James felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the truth. Claire hadn't died of natural causes. She had been murdered. The man's grip on Claire tightened, and the room shook violently. The walls seemed to pulse with the same energy as the dark figure in the mirror, and the whispers grew louder. "Help me," Claire's voice echoed in the room, full of sorrow and pain. The door behind James slammed shut, and the lights flickered once more. He had to do something. But what could he do? The spirit wasn't just trapped. It was being held captive by something much darker. The man's eyes met James's in the mirror, and an overwhelming sense of dread filled him. The room began to close in, the air so thick he could hardly breathe. James knew he had to leave, but as he backed toward the door, the figure in the mirror stepped forward, moving closer and closer to the glass. The mirror began to crack further, splintering with every step the shadowed man took. With one last, desperate glance at Claire, James turned and bolted for the door. As he yanked it open, he heard her scream, louder and more piercing than ever before. James never returned to that hotel. He couldn't. But he couldn't forget the look in Claire's eyes, or the presence of the dark figure that had haunted her. Some nights, he still heard her whisper in his dreams, calling for help. But whatever held her in room 314 was far more powerful than he could face alone.